Hello, Charlotte here for the Little Paper Tree, and today I'm sharing a simple masked card using stamps from Picket Fence Studios. To start with, I'm going to be stamping my sentiment, which is from the A Bright Night stamp set, and I will stamp that directly onto my card base. This card base is made of Neenah 110-pound cardstock, which is alcohol marker friendly, which will be useful in a little bit. And I'm stamping with MFT Black Licorice Hybrid Ink, which is also safe for using with your alcohol markers. I'm doing all my stamping directly on the card base because I want to make a one-layer card. Once I have my sentiment stamped, I'm going to add my focal image using the Princess Owl stamp. And again, using that MFT Black Licorice Hybrid ink. This is my go-to ink because it works really well with your alcohol markers and is also suitable for watercolouring. And I will stamp it a couple of times just to get a nice dark impression. Once I'm happy with that, I will start on my colouring, and I'm using Spectrum Noir Illustrator markers to do the colouring, but you can use whatever alcohol markers you prefer. And you can see the caps on screen showing the colours I am using. I'm going to start first by colouring the owl's skirt in a variety of tealy turquoisey colours. And I will start with my darkest colours first. If you're a bit unsure about where your shadows should go, then you can go in first with a lighter colour to map in the shadow areas, and then you're not committed to them until you're happy with it. But I generally start with the darkest and work down to my lightest. Often with clothing where there's a lot of folds, I will actually go back over more than one time with all my colours to make sure there's enough depth to the image, but on this occasion I just did it the one time. And with this image I am, as I usually do, putting my shadows as if the light source is on the top right hand side. I find it's helpful to be fairly consistent over all my projects in terms of my light source, because then I don't have to think about it as much. Of course, that is different if I'm using an image that has a light source built in, or if I'm adding a sun, for example, then the light would be coming from that, in which case it might not always be that top right hand side, but even so, it's a good rule of thumb. Once I've finished colouring the skirt, I'm going to use the same shades to colour in the crown of the owl, and again I'm working from darkest to lightest. As I want the crown to look shiny, I will actually leave a very narrow white strip so that it's not entirely coloured, and this will just give that little bit of shine to the crown and make it look more like it's made of metal. I decided I also wanted to bring that same colour in elsewhere on the owl, so I decided to use it for the eyebrows. Generally when I'm colouring animals, I try to use realistic colours. I actually have a bit of a hard time sometimes using unrealistic colours, but on this occasion I thought I would give it a go. So as well as those tealy green eyebrows, I'm going to be using pink on my owl, and pink is a colour that goes very nicely with teal. So I'm using the pink for the wings, the tops of the legs, and also the spots on the owl's body. And again, you can see the colours I am using on the caps on screen. I didn't add shading to the individual spots on the owl's body, I just did each of them a single colour, but I made sure that the ones towards the edge were the darker pinks so that it still has the same shading across the entirety of the body, almost as if we're considering the spots to be one item rather than individual items, if that makes sense at all. I did use the same pinks to colour the owl's beak, and then I had a little bit of bleeding under one of the eyebrows, so I went in with my blender pen just to knock that back a bit. Next I coloured in the body of the owl, and I didn't want to bring in any more colour here, so I decided to go with some creamy colours to make the owl be just off-white and just add a bit of shading. You could keep the body of the owl white, but I would still suggest using some kind of shading just to make it look more dimensional. And there are a lot of different ways to colour white. You could do, as I have done here, using ivory shades to give it a creamy look. You could use greys, that would make it look cooler. If you're colouring something like a snowman, then blue works well as the shadow areas because that makes it look cold. It really depends what you're colouring. And when I'm colouring white, I generally use my blender pen to be, in effect, my lightest shade, because that helps fade out to the white. I did bring in one other colour, just a very light yellow, to colour the eyes on the owl, and that completed my colouring. So then I'm going to move on to the background stamping, which is the masked portion of this card. I'm going to put some washi tape in strips along the card base, and I have one of my Misty Creative corners to help me with working out the angle for these. I'm not going to show all of this on screen because my head kept getting in the way, and then here you can see how I have it all masked off. So I effectively created 3 strips, and I covered up the middle one as well, so that I'm just stamping the outer 2 strips. I'm using the background stamp from the A Bright Night stamp set, which is the same one I used for my sentiment, and I'm first stamping with Volcano Lake ink, which is a nice teal colour which will go well with my owl. You might notice that I forgot to mask off the back of my card, so my stamping does overlap onto the back of the card, but that doesn't matter too much. You could cover it up with a piece of paper if you want, or just leave it. It's a handmade card, it doesn't matter too much. I did have a bit of trouble with getting these lines stamped. I'm not sure if it was that my masking was too thick, especially where I'd put that scrap paper to protect the bottom portion of the card, or equally I think there could have been some bubbles underneath the stamp where it was on the Misty door, which can happen sometimes, but with some firm pressing I did eventually manage to get that stamped down properly. Then I moved my masks so I could stamp on the middle strip, and this time I'm using Frosty Pink ink from Altenew, and again this will go nicely with the colours I used on my owl. Again, I had some issues with the stamping, and I do think here definitely there was a bit of a bubble under the stamp, so I should have been a bit more careful when I put the stamp onto the Misty door, but with some firm pressing I did eventually manage to get it to stamp properly. So with all the stamping done, I was able to remove my masks and just carefully peeling off that washi tape. Washi tape does tend to be low tack, but you still want to be very careful with it. I had a couple of places where I couldn't get the end up, so I did use my reverse tweezers to help me with that. And I realised at this point that I should have remembered to remove some of the tackiness from the washi tape before putting it on my project. You can do this just by pressing it onto your hand, for example, because this green washi in particular turned out to be a bit too sticky and actually brought up part of my card. So I took a moment trying to think what to do, because I didn't want to rip it anymore. I didn't want to have to start over. So what I ended up deciding to do was I put just a little bit of Tombow Monomulti liquid glue onto the card base underneath where that paper had peeled up. I then pulled the washi across to lay the torn bit back into place, and I pressed my bone folder along it to really press it firmly down and get it back into position. Then obviously I didn't want to pull from the same end because that would be very likely to just pull it straight back up. So I instead turned the card over and lifted the washi tape from the other end. And even though I had been careful in pulling the washi tape up initially, I made sure to be even more careful this time and just take it really, really slowly. And luckily I was able to get it up without ripping the card anymore. And I don't think the damage shows all that much. The piece did stick down and I can see it, but I think if you weren't looking for it then you probably wouldn't notice. But hopefully next time I will remember to remove the excess stickiness before using the washi tape on my card. So then I just have to remove the final piece of washi tape, and that reveals all of that simple masked area I created. And this is a fun way to use your background stamps. They don't always have to cover a full background. You can use just selective parts of them like this to get a bit of a different look from them. I wasn't entirely happy with how the strips looked though. I couldn't quite put my finger on what the issue was, but I felt like they were missing something. So in the end I decided to bring in some peel-offs and to edge each of the stripes with the peel-offs. This also helped me even them out a bit because the top 2 strips were actually slightly wider than the bottom one. So when I put the peel-offs on, I put them on the top 2 strips, I put them so that they were just within the boundaries of the strips, whereas on the bottom one I put them so they were just outside of the boundaries, which helped the 3 strips look like a more even size. And I did match the peel-offs to each of the strips, so I used pink glitter ones on the pink strip, and then I used green glitter, which was the closest I had to the teal, on the teal strips. And as I usually do with peel-offs, I use my reverse tweezers to help me with the positioning, and I'll just fiddle around until I have them in place. I'm using the narrowest width that these come in for each of these, and once I am happy with them all, I will trim off any overhanging pieces, and those overhanging pieces will go back onto the sticker sheet so that I can use them on future projects, because I don't like to let any of it go to waste. And that will complete my card. I hope you enjoyed this. It's a very clean and simple design, and as I said, that simple masking of the background stamp does add some extra interest to it. If you did like this video, be sure to press the thumbs up button to let us know. You could also leave a comment down below and let me know when was the last time you made a 1-layer card, and maybe you could tell me if you have any Picket Fence Studios stamps yourself and which ones your favourites are. There are links to all the products I have used in the description box below, so be sure to check those out. There's also a discount code you could use. If you're not yet subscribed to my channel or the Little Paper Tree channel, there are buttons showing on screen now and you can subscribe to both of our channels, and there's also another video that you may be interested in. Otherwise, I'll thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!